A mother despises her son for marrying a poor woman, until she discovers that her daughter-in-law is. The sprawling mansion gleamed in the late afternoon sun, a symbol of wealth and heritage. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken tension as the mother, a woman who prided herself on her impeccable lineage, met her son's fiancée for the first time. She, the matriarch of one of the most respected families, had spent her life preserving their legacy, and this young woman, plain and of humble origins, stood as a threat to everything she had built. Her only son, her pride, had chosen someone who did not belong. The mother's gaze swept over the girl, and immediately, a seed of disdain was planted deep within her heart. Her son, always kind and gentle, stood beside his fiancée, a smile on his face. He had expected his mother to be hesitant, but he never imagined the depth of her disapproval. He introduced the woman he loved with enthusiasm, hoping to bridge the gap between their worlds. But it was not enough. The mother's eyes, cold and calculating, saw only what was missing: the lack of a powerful family name, the absence of wealth and influence. To her, this was not a union of love but of poor judgment. She masked her disappointment behind a thin smile, but her son could feel the sharpness of her unspoken words. From the moment they exchanged greetings, the mother knew this relationship would never have her blessing. To her, love alone could not justify such a mismatch. She believed her son was making the gravest mistake of his life. As the conversation progressed, she spoke politely but with an edge that cut deep. "Have you thought this through?" she asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. Her son, sensing the disapproval, tried to explain. He spoke of the fiancée's kindness, her strength of character, her unwavering support. But with each word, the mother's mind closed further, convinced this girl had nothing to offer their family. The tension in the room grew palpable. The son's attempts to reason with his mother fell on deaf ears. She was steadfast in her belief that he was blinded by love, unable to see the harsh reality she so clearly saw. The mother believed that his fiancée was after their wealth, their status, a fortune hunter in disguise. Despite her son's passionate defense, she remained unmoved. Her thoughts turned cold and calculating, as she considered how to save her son from what she viewed as an impending disaster. Her pride would not allow her to admit even the possibility of being wrong. The fiancée, standing quietly beside her future husband, sensed the mother's hostility but remained respectful. She had known from the beginning that this meeting would be a challenge, but she didn't expect the intensity of the judgment cast upon her. Still, she stood firm, hoping her sincerity would eventually soften the mother's heart. But each glance from the older woman felt like a dismissal, a reminder that she would never truly belong. The son, caught in the middle, felt the weight of both women's expectations. He had never defied his mother before, but for the woman he loved, he knew he had to stand firm. The conversation soon reached a breaking point. The mother's thin veil of politeness slipped, and her true feelings came to the surface. "She's not right for you," she said sharply, her eyes fixed on her son with a mix of anger and desperation. "She doesn't understand what it means to be part of this family." Her son's heart sank. He had expected resistance, but not outright rejection. His voice, usually soft and calm, rose in frustration. "You don't even know her," he exclaimed. But the mother's mind was set. In her eyes, this girl could never be worthy of the family name. As the argument escalated, the son felt torn between the two most important women in his life. His mother, the one who had raised him with love and care, and his fiancée, the woman he had chosen to build a future with. The mother's words, sharp and cutting, wounded him deeply. But he refused to back down. For the first time, he stood against his mother's will, defending his choice with a resolve that surprised even him. The mother, shocked by her son's defiance, felt her control slipping. The fracture between them, once a small crack, had now widened into a deep chasm. The mother retreated to her rooms that evening, her mind racing. She had always been the one in control, the one who knew best. But now, her son was defying her in a way she had never anticipated. How could he, her perfect boy, be so blind? The fear of losing her grip on him gnawed at her. But even as her mind swirled with plans to undo this engagement, a small part of her began to question. Could she be wrong? No, she thought, pushing the doubt away. She had to protect him, even if it meant breaking his heart. The son, too, felt the strain of the day's events. He had always respected his mother, valued her opinions, but this time, he couldn't let her dictate his future. His love for his fiancée was real, and he would fight for it, no matter the cost. But as he lay awake that night, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Could he truly keep both his love and his family intact? The weight of the decision pressed down on him, and for the first time, he feared that there might be no way to reconcile the two. His world was changing, and he wasn't sure how to stop it. The tension between mother and son had reached a breaking point, but the true consequences of their fractured relationship had yet to unfold. As the days passed, the mother's disdain for the fiancé only grew, while the son became more determined to stand by his choice. Neither would yield, and the battle lines were drawn. The question that now loomed over them was not if the family could survive this rift, but how far the mother would go to protect the legacy she held so dear. And with that question, the future of their family hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of a deeper conflict. The days following the confrontation were filled with an eerie silence in the house. The mother's disapproval had become an unspoken rule, a cloud hanging over every interaction. She didn't need to repeat her objections, her actions spoke loudly enough. Invitations were withdrawn, conversations grew short, and any mention of the wedding was met with cold indifference. The son, though hurt, refused to back down. He continued his life with his fiancée, pushing forward with their plans despite the growing distance from his mother. But as the wedding day approached, the tension only deepened, and the mother's silent resistance became more forceful. The mother had always been a strategist, used to getting her way without confrontation. Now, she employed more subtle methods to express her disapproval. She canceled long-standing arrangements with influential guests who might have attended the wedding, leaving key figures out of the celebration. Behind the scenes, she whispered doubts into the ears of family friends, painting her son's fiancé as an opportunist. In her mind, she wasn't sabotaging the wedding, she was saving her son from a lifetime of regret. Each move was calculated, intended to isolate the couple, to force her son to see what she believed to be the truth. Yet, the fiancé remained steadfast. She faced each cold shoulder, each whispered insult, with quiet dignity. Her humility was her strength, and she never once retaliated against the mother's veiled attacks. She believed that with time, she could win the woman's acceptance. But each day felt like a battle. While her future husband stood by her side, she could feel the weight of his mother's disapproval bearing down on them. It was exhausting, yet she held on to the hope that love, in the end, would be enough to change the mother's heart. But hope alone, she knew, wasn't always enough. As for the son, he felt the strain growing between his two worlds. His fiancée, who he loved deeply, never complained about his mother's treatment, but he could see how it weighed on her. On the other hand, his mother's passive aggression was a constant reminder of the deep rift that had formed. Every time he visited the family home, there was an unspoken challenge in the air, as though his mother was daring him to admit he had made a mistake. But in his heart, he knew he hadn't. He loved his fiancée, and no amount of pressure could make him turn back now. The mother's pride, however, would not allow her to relent. To her, admitting defeat meant accepting that her son's judgment had outgrown her own. And worse, it would mean that her vision of what was best for him had been flawed. Her son had always trusted her, respected her opinions. Now, it felt like all of that was slipping away, replaced by this new influence, this woman who seemed to have stolen his heart, and, in the mother's eyes, his loyalty. She couldn't bear the thought of being replaced, of losing her son to someone she deemed unworthy. As the days passed, the mother's belief that her son was making a terrible mistake only solidified. She refused to attend the pre-wedding events, sending subtle messages to those around her that she did not approve. To the outside world, it looked as if the family was falling apart. Yet the mother saw herself as the guardian of their legacy, standing firm in the face of what she believed to be her son's folly. Her pride kept her from seeing the love between the couple as real or valid. Instead, she clung to the belief that the fiancé had manipulated her way into their lives. The fiancé, though pained by the mother's constant rejection, continued to try. She reached out, offering invitations to spend time together, to get to know each other better. But every attempt was rebuffed. The mother's icy demeanor never wavered. It was as if no gesture, no kindness, could melt the wall of pride that had been built between them. Despite this, the fiancée refused to speak ill of her future mother-in-law. She believed that time would soften the woman's heart, that patience and perseverance would eventually bring them closer. But with each passing day, that hope grew dimmer. The son, meanwhile, found himself caught in a never-ending tug-of-war between his love for his fiancée and his deep-rooted loyalty to his mother. He had always respected her wisdom, her strength. But now, he saw a side of her he hadn't known existed, her refusal to see beyond her own prejudice, her unwillingness to bend. It broke his heart, but he knew he couldn't let her stand in the way of his future. He had made his choice, and though the road ahead was fraught with tension, he would not abandon the woman he loved. Despite the mother's best efforts, the wedding plans continued. The couple moved forward with determination, surrounded by friends who supported their union. Yet the absence of the mother loomed large over every detail. Her refusal to give her blessing became a topic of gossip among those who knew the family, a stain on what should have been a joyous occasion. The son, though deeply saddened by his mother's absence, held on to the hope that once the wedding was over, once they had built a life together, things might change. But for now, the chasm between them seemed too wide to bridge. As the wedding day neared, the mother could feel the weight of her isolation. She had pushed her son away, convinced that in time he would come to his senses. But instead, she watched as he drew closer to his fiancée, his determination only growing. Yet, even as she stood firm in her resistance, a small seed of doubt had begun to take root. Could she really be right? Or was her pride blinding her to the possibility that she had misjudged this young woman? But these thoughts remained buried beneath layers of certainty, too uncomfortable to fully confront, at least, not yet. It was a quiet afternoon when the mother overheard a conversation between her son and his fiancée. They were seated on the terrace, discussing wedding plans, their voices light with excitement. But then, the fiancée mentioned something in passing, a detail from her past that instantly caught the mother's attention. Her ears pricked as the fiancée spoke of a life she once had, one that didn't align with the simple, humble image the mother had of her. A spark of suspicion flickered to life. Could there be more to this woman than she had originally thought? The mother, always one to trust her instincts, knew she had to find out. Her son seemed unfazed by the conversation, which only fueled the mother's curiosity further. How could he not see it? There was something off, something hidden. The fiancé had mentioned a place, a family name that sounded familiar to the mother, though she couldn't quite place it. It was a fleeting moment, but enough to stir her suspicions. The mother's mind, ever sharp and calculating, began to race. Had this woman been hiding something all along? Was she not the simple girl she claimed to be? For the first time, the mother considered the possibility that she had misjudged the situation. That evening, the mother retreated to her study, determined to piece together what she had heard. She couldn't shake the feeling that her son's fiancé was concealing something significant. Her instincts had always served her well in the past, and she wasn't about to ignore them now. Pulling out an old box of family documents, she searched for the name that had lingered in her mind since that afternoon. It was a long shot, but the mother had a way of connecting the dots. If there was something to uncover, she would find it. Her pride, however, made her believe that this investigation would only confirm her earlier suspicions. Days passed as the mother discreetly investigated, delving into records and quietly asking questions within her social circles. The more she dug, the more perplexing the fiancé's background seemed. The girl was not as simple as she appeared. There were gaps in her story, inconsistencies that didn't quite add up. A sense of unease began to settle over the mother. She had set out to prove the fiancé was after their wealth, but what she found only deepened the mystery. Her assumptions were shaken, and a part of her began to question whether her judgment had been too hasty. Then came the discovery, a piece of information that changed everything. The fiancée had not always lived a humble life. In fact, she had once been part of a wealthy, well-respected family that had fallen into hard times. The name the mother had heard during the conversation now made sense. It belonged to a family she herself had known in her youth, a family that had been on equal social footing with her own before misfortune struck. Bankruptcy, illness, and tragedy had left them in ruins, forcing the fiancée to rebuild her life from nothing. This revelation left the mother both stunned and conflicted. The mother sat in silence, processing what she had uncovered. All this time, she had believed the fiancé to be a social climber, someone beneath their station. But now, she realized that the young woman's story mirrored her own in some ways. Both had faced societal judgment, both had struggled to prove their worth. Yet, the mother had never expected to find such a parallel. Her initial prejudice had blinded her to the deeper truth. But even now, with this new information, the mother wasn't sure what to do with it. Her pride still held her back from admitting she might have been wrong. The son remained blissfully unaware of his mother's investigation. To him, his fiancée had always been honest about her past. Her humble origins were a point of pride, not shame. But the mother, with this new understanding, saw things differently. She wrestled with the idea that this woman, who she had deemed unworthy, might actually come from a lineage that she had once respected. The mother couldn't help but feel torn. Should she confront her son with what she had discovered? Or should she continue to resist, clinging to the belief that this marriage was a mistake? The discovery placed the mother in an emotional quandary. On one hand, her pride told her that the fiancé's background changed nothing. Status, after all, was still a matter of wealth and standing in the present. But on the other, she couldn't ignore the growing realization that she had been too quick to judge. The fiancé's resilience, her grace under pressure, suddenly made more sense. This was a woman who had faced hardship and survived, just as the mother had in her own way. For the first time, the mother saw the fiancé not as a threat, but as someone who might actually understand her world. But the mother's hesitation remained. Admitting that she had misjudged the fiancé meant confronting her own flaws, something she had never been willing to do. Her whole life had been built on the idea that she knew best, that her decisions were infallible. Yet, this revelation chipped away at that certainty. The fiancé, it seemed, was more complex, more layered than the mother had given her credit for. Still, doubt lingered. Could this newfound understanding really bridge the gap between them? Or was the damage already done? The mother wasn't ready to face that question yet. As the mother pondered her next move, a sense of unease settled over her. She had always been in control, always the one pulling the strings. But now, for the first time, she felt uncertain. The fiancé's past had thrown her carefully constructed plans into disarray, and the mother was left wondering how to proceed. Should she reveal what she had learned, or keep it to herself, allowing the tension to continue building? The balance of power had shifted, and the mother could feel it. Yet, deep down, she knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger emotional reckoning. The mother's discovery weighed heavily on her, casting a shadow over her once unwavering certainty. In the quiet of her mansion, she began to feel the cracks in her convictions, though her pride still held her captive. She remembered the fiancé's calm demeanor, her quiet strength. These were not the traits of someone trying to exploit their wealth. Instead, the young woman had faced each confrontation with a grace that was becoming harder to dismiss. Still, the mother couldn't bring herself to fully accept the truth. Admitting she might be wrong would mean unraveling years of belief in her own infallibility. Late at night, when the house was still, the mother found herself lost in thought. Her mind wandered back to her own youth, to the struggles she had faced to be accepted into the world she now ruled so confidently. She had not come from the same wealth and prestige that she now enjoyed. In fact, her rise had been hard-won, filled with moments where she had to prove herself worthy of the position she now held. The parallels between her own story and that of her son's fiancé unsettled her. Had she been too quick to judge? The thought lingered, growing heavier with each passing day. The fiancé's past began to occupy the mother's thoughts more and more. She had dismissed the young woman as an outsider, but now, knowing the truth of her origins, the mother felt conflicted. This woman was not so different from herself, after all. They both understood the weight of judgment, of societal expectations. Yet, the mother had projected all of her fears onto the fiancé, convinced that she was a threat to their family's legacy. The truth was more complex, and that complexity scared the mother. It forced her to confront the fact that her pride had blinded her, perhaps from the very beginning. But the mother's pride was not easily broken. Even as doubts crept in, she clung to the idea that she had been protecting her son from a grave mistake. How could she have been so wrong? She had always known what was best for him, hadn't she? These thoughts, though comforting, began to feel hollow. The fiancé's resilience, her quiet dignity in the face of rejection, had shaken the mother's perception of her. Slowly, the mother began to realize that her fight was not just with her son's fiancé, but with herself. She was battling her own fears, fears of losing control, of being wrong. As the days passed, the mother's inner conflict grew. She had always prided herself on being strong, on making the tough decisions for the sake of the family. But now, those very decisions felt like shackles, binding her to an outdated way of thinking. She couldn't help but wonder if her stubbornness had cost her more than she was willing to admit. Had her refusal to accept the fiancé driven a wedge between her and her son that could never be repaired? The fear of losing him gnawed at her, but her pride still whispered that it was not too late to undo the damage. Each interaction with her son was now tinged with unspoken tension. He continued to stand by his fiancée, unshaken in his love and commitment to her. The mother could see the distance between them growing, even though they still shared the same spaces. It was as if they were speaking two different languages, he, full of hope for his future with the woman he loved, and she, trapped in a past that no longer seemed to fit. Every moment they spent together reminded the mother that time was running out for her to make amends. Yet, her pride kept her from taking the first step. The more the mother thought about it, the more she realized that her disdain for the fiancé had little to do with the young woman herself. It was about her own fears, fears of losing control, of becoming irrelevant in her son's life. The fiancé was simply the catalyst, the one who had forced her to confront these uncomfortable truths. But now, with the truth of the fiancé's background laid bare, the mother felt trapped. She had built her objections on a foundation of prejudice, and that foundation was crumbling beneath her feet. Still, admitting defeat felt impossible. Despite these internal battles, the mother maintained her outward demeanor. She still kept her distance from the fiancé, still clung to the belief that she was protecting her family. But inside, the guilt was growing. Every time she saw her son smile at his fiancée, every time she witnessed their love for each other, the mother felt a pang of regret. It was becoming harder to ignore the fact that she was the one standing in the way of their happiness. Yet, the longer she waited to act, the more daunting the task of reconciliation seemed. Pride, once her strength, now felt like a prison. One evening, the mother found herself standing in front of the old family portraits that lined the hall. Generations of proud, strong figures looked down at her, their stern faces a reminder of the legacy she had worked so hard to protect. But now, that legacy felt heavy, almost suffocating. What was the point of preserving it if it meant losing the very people she loved? The mother's thoughts drifted back to her son and his fiancée. Could she find a way to let go of the past and accept the future they were building together? The question lingered, but the answer still eluded her. The mother's heart was torn between two worlds, the world she had spent her life building and the new world her son was creating with his fiancée. She could feel the walls she had built around herself starting to crack, but pride held them in place, for now. The doubts that had once been small whispers had grown into a constant, nagging voice in the back of her mind. Change was coming, whether she was ready for it or not. And though she wasn't sure how to proceed, the mother knew that this was just the beginning of a much deeper emotional journey. The mother's determination to uncover more about the fiancé's past led her deeper into the web of the young woman's history. One evening, she stumbled upon something unexpected, an old newspaper article that detailed the downfall of a prominent family. The name was unmistakable, the very same one that the fiancé had casually mentioned in that fateful conversation. As the mother read through the article, her hands trembled. The fiancé's family had once been a pillar of the community, wealthy and influential, before a series of tragedies had left them bankrupt and disgraced. This was the key piece the mother had been missing. The discovery shook her to the core. This family had been a part of her own world, decades ago, before their fortunes had changed. She remembered the whispered conversations at society events, the way people had distanced themselves from the family as their wealth vanished. And now, here was the daughter of that same family, standing on the threshold of her own. The mother's mind raced. How had she not seen this connection before? The fiancé had been walking in the shadow of a fallen legacy, one that the mother had once respected. The revelation left her feeling disoriented, her long-held judgments crumbling. The more the mother thought about it, the more conflicted she became. On one hand, the fiancé's connection to a once respected family should have reassured her. This woman was not an outsider, but someone with a lineage the mother had once admired. But on the other hand, the mother couldn't shake the bitterness she felt. If the fiancé had come from such a family, why had she hidden it? Was it shame? Pride? The mother's mind, always sharp and suspicious, couldn't help but wonder if the young woman had concealed her past on purpose. But even as she questioned, the answers seemed more complicated than she had anticipated. Confronted with the truth, the mother's perspective began to shift in ways she hadn't expected. Her immediate impulse was to share what she had learned with her son, to reveal this hidden connection and demand answers. But something stopped her. For the first time, she hesitated, unsure of what to do with this new information. The fiancé had been nothing but respectful, even in the face of her scorn. Was it possible that the young woman had simply wanted to be judged for who she was now, not for the family she had come from? The thought unsettled the mother, forcing her to question her own actions. The discovery left the mother feeling more uncertain than ever. For so long, she had been certain that the fiancé didn't belong in their world. But now, with this revelation, everything seemed turned upside down. The fiancé came from the very kind of background the mother had once insisted was essential, yet she had built her life anew, independent of the family's former glory. It was a feat the mother had to respect, even if she didn't want to admit it. Her assumptions had been wrong, and she was faced with the uncomfortable truth that her prejudice had blinded her to the reality of the situation. The conflict within the mother deepened. Her discovery had changed the narrative she had been telling herself for months. The fiancé wasn't a gold digger, nor was she trying to climb the social ladder. In fact, she had every reason to use her family's past to her advantage, but she hadn't. This realization made the mother feel a pang of guilt she hadn't expected. How could she have judged this young woman so harshly, when all she had done was try to build a new life from the ashes of her family's downfall? The mother, so used to being in control, now felt her grip slipping. The next time the mother saw her son, she could hardly look him in the eye. She had spent so long trying to protect him from what she believed was a grave mistake, but now, it seemed that she had been the one in the wrong. Her son, oblivious to her internal struggle, continued to speak lovingly of his fiancée, unaware of the storm brewing within his mother. The mother wanted to tell him everything she had learned, to explain the depth of her discovery. But she couldn't bring herself to do it. Not yet. The weight of her silence was becoming unbearable. In the days that followed, the mother found herself watching the fiancé more closely. Every interaction, every gesture, was now seen in a new light. The young woman's humility, her quiet strength, made more sense now. She wasn't trying to impress anyone or win anyone's approval, she had already lived through a life of privilege and loss. The mother began to understand that the fiancé's calmness wasn't born from submission, but from experience. This was someone who had faced hardship and survived, much like the mother herself. And with that realization, the mother's resentment started to fade, replaced by something much more complex. But even as the mother's view of the fiancé softened, her pride kept her from admitting it. To tell her son what she had learned would mean admitting that she had been wrong from the start. It would mean facing the fact that her own prejudice had nearly cost her the relationship with her only child. The mother wasn't ready for that yet. She clung to the idea that there was still more to uncover, that perhaps the fiancé was hiding something else. It was easier to continue searching for flaws than to confront the ones in herself. Yet deep down, she knew this path couldn't last much longer. The discovery had brought the mother to a crossroads. She could continue down the path of resistance, letting her pride keep her from accepting the truth, or she could take the first steps toward reconciliation. But the thought of apologizing, of admitting her fault, felt like a betrayal of everything she had stood for. The family's legacy had always been built on strength, on never showing weakness. Could she really show that vulnerability now? The internal battle raged on, leaving the mother in a state of emotional paralysis. She was torn between the woman she had been and the woman she was becoming. The air was thick with tension as the mother finally gathered the courage to confront her son and his fiancée. She had held on to the secret of the fiancé's past for days, but the weight of it had become too much to bear. The moment came unexpectedly, during a family dinner. The mother, unable to suppress her emotions any longer, set down her glass and looked directly at her son. Her voice was steady, but the turmoil beneath it was palpable. "There's something I need to tell you," she began, her eyes flicking between him and the fiancé. This was it, the moment of reckoning. The son, caught off guard by the serious tone in his mother's voice, glanced at his fiancée, worry etched on his face. He knew his mother well enough to sense that this was no ordinary conversation. The fiancée, too, sensed the shift in the room but remained calm, her hands resting lightly in her lap. She had always known this day would come, the day when the mother would confront her directly. The mother's next words hung in the air like a challenge. "I know about your family," she said, her voice sharp but controlled. The fiancé's face didn't change, but there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes. For a moment, silence enveloped the room. The son, confused, looked between the two women, searching for answers. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice strained. The mother took a deep breath, then launched into the story she had uncovered, the once wealthy family, the downfall, the tragedies that had left the fiancé's family in ruins. She spoke without malice, but her words carried the weight of months of misunderstanding and judgment. As the truth spilled out, the son's expression changed from confusion to shock. He had never known this side of his fiancé's past. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked her quietly. The fiancé, calm as ever, met his gaze. "Because it doesn't define who I am now," she replied softly. Her voice held no defensiveness, only a quiet certainty. "I wanted you to love me for who I've become, not for the family I came from." Her words hung in the air, echoing in the silence that followed. The mother, who had expected defensiveness or guilt, was taken aback by the fiancé's response. There was no shame, no attempt to hide the truth. Instead, the fiancée stood firm in her identity, making it clear that her past was just that, her past. The son, still reeling from the revelation, turned to his mother. "Why does this matter?" he asked, his voice strained with emotion. "Why did you keep this from me?" The mother, for the first time in years, felt unsure of herself. She had believed that revealing the fiancé's past would vindicate her, but instead, it only highlighted how misguided her assumptions had been. I thought you should know the truth," she stammered, struggling to find the right words. "I wanted to protect you." But even as she spoke, the mother knew that her desire to protect had been rooted in pride, not love. The son's frustration boiled over. "Protect me from what? From someone who's been nothing but kind and honest with me?" His voice cracked with emotion. "This isn't about protection, Mom. This is about control. You never trusted me to make my own decisions." His words hit the mother like a blow. She had always seen herself as the one guiding him, shaping his future, but now, for the first time, she saw the damage that her control had done. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence as the mother wrestled with the guilt that had been building for months. The fiancée, sensing the tension between mother and son, spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. "I never wanted to hide my past from you," she said, turning to the son. "But I didn't think it was relevant. I've spent my life building something new, something different from the family I came from. I wanted you to love me for who I am now." Her words were simple, but they carried a deep truth. The mother, for all her efforts to uncover the fiancé's past, had missed the most important part of the story, the strength it took to move forward from that past. As the fiancé's words sank in, the mother felt a wave of remorse wash over her. She had been so focused on the past, on maintaining the family's legacy, that she had failed to see the value in the present. Her obsession with status and control had blinded her to the person her son had chosen, someone who had proven herself through resilience and grace. The mother's heart ached with the realization that she had let her own pride create a rift in her family. For the first time, she saw her son's fiancée not as a threat, but as a woman who had earned her place in their lives. Tears welled up in the mother's eyes, but she blinked them away, unwilling to show weakness. "I see now that I was wrong," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "I let my pride get in the way of what's important." The words were hard to say, but once they were out, the mother felt a strange sense of relief. She had been holding on to her bitterness for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to let go. Her son, though still hurt, could see the sincerity in her eyes. For the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope between them. The fiancée remained silent, allowing the moment to unfold. She had never sought the mother's approval, but now, seeing the older woman admit her faults, she felt a sense of peace. This was the confrontation that had been brewing for months, and though it had been painful, it was also necessary. The mother's apology, though small, was a start. The path to healing wouldn't be easy, but at least now, they had taken the first step. And with that, the long-standing conflict between mother and son had begun to shift. But whether the wounds could fully heal was a question only time would answer. The days after the confrontation were filled with quiet reflection. The mother, who had spent so long resisting any change, found herself softened by the realization of her own mistakes. Though the wounds from the argument were still fresh, she could sense that a shift had occurred. For the first time, she truly saw the fiancé as more than just a threat to the family's legacy. The humility and grace with which the young woman had handled the situation had left a deep impression on her. And with that, the mother knew that she had taken the first, tentative step toward forgiveness, both for her son and for herself. It wasn't easy for the mother to move forward. Her pride still stung, and the old habits of judgment and control lingered at the edges of her thoughts. But now, there was something new, a desire to heal the fractured relationships that had been damaged by her resistance. She began to make small gestures, extending olive branches in ways she hadn't before. She asked her son about the wedding plans with genuine interest, though her involvement was far more restrained than it once would have been. She wasn't fully ready to embrace everything, but she was willing to try. And for her, that was a significant change. The son, though still hurt by the months of tension, recognized his mother's efforts. He had always loved her, despite their differences, and he could see that she was trying. He hadn't expected her to change overnight, but the fact that she had admitted her mistakes and was now taking steps toward reconciliation was enough for him. The fiancé, too, could feel the shift. Though the mother hadn't fully opened her heart, there was a quiet respect now that hadn't been there before. It was as if the walls that had once separated them were beginning to crumble, brick by brick. One afternoon, the mother invited the couple for tea, a small but meaningful gesture. As they sat together in the grand sitting room, the atmosphere was different from the icy coldness that had once defined their interactions. The conversation was polite, and though there were still moments of awkwardness, the tension had lessened. The fiancée spoke with the same quiet dignity that had always marked her character, and for the first time, the mother found herself listening, truly listening, without judgment. She began to see the fiancée not as an outsider, but as a woman who had faced her own trials with strength and resilience. As the tea progressed, the mother hesitated for a moment, then spoke carefully. "I know I've been difficult," she said, her voice softer than usual. I've spent so long trying to protect this family, but I see now that I've hurt you both in the process." Her son looked at her, surprised by the vulnerability in her words. The fiancé, too, was taken aback. This was the first time the mother had openly acknowledged the pain she had caused. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start, and the son nodded, appreciating the effort it had taken for her to speak those words. The fiancé, ever composed, responded with grace. "We all make mistakes," she said quietly. "What matters is that we learn from them." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that touched the mother deeply. The fiancé wasn't asking for an apology or demanding anything. She was offering a chance to move forward, to rebuild what had been broken. For the mother, this was both humbling and freeing. She had expected anger or resentment, but instead, she was met with understanding. The weight of her guilt began to lift, and for the first time in months, she felt a sense of hope. The son, seeing the exchange between his mother and fiancé, felt a sense of relief wash over him. This was what he had wanted all along, for the two most important women in his life to find some common ground. Though he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, this moment of understanding gave him hope that things could truly change. He reached out and took his fiancé's hand, a silent gesture of support. The mother, noticing the gesture, felt a pang of regret for how she had tried to come between them. But that regret was tempered by the realization that it wasn't too late to mend the relationship. The mother's path to forgiveness wasn't just about accepting her son's fiancé. It was also about forgiving herself for the mistakes she had made. She had always been so focused on preserving the family's legacy that she hadn't realized how much damage her pride had caused. Now, as she sat across from the couple, she saw the future of her family in a new light. It wasn't about wealth or status, but about love, resilience, and the ability to grow. And in that moment, the mother knew that forgiveness wasn't just something she had to give to others, it was something she had to give herself as well. Over the next few weeks, the relationship between the mother and the couple slowly began to heal. There were still moments of tension, but they were fewer and less intense. The mother found herself becoming more open, more willing to let go of the control she had clung to for so long. She began to see her son's fiancé not as a threat to the family, but as someone who could strengthen it in ways she hadn't considered. And with each passing day, the mother's heart softened a little more, allowing room for forgiveness to take root and grow. As the wedding day approached, the mother finally found peace within herself. She knew that she still had a long way to go in repairing the damage that had been done, but she was willing to put in the effort. Her pride no longer controlled her, and in its place, a newfound understanding had taken hold. The road to forgiveness was long and winding, but for the first time, the mother felt she was on the right path. And though the journey wasn't over, she knew that with time, the fractures in their family could heal. They had all taken the first step, and that was enough for now. As the wedding day dawned, the mother stood by the window, watching the first light of morning spill over the gardens of the family estate. There was a calmness in the air, one she hadn't felt in a long time. The journey over the past months had changed her in ways she hadn't expected. She had fought so hard to preserve what she thought was important: status, legacy, control, but now, as she prepared to watch her only son marry the woman he loved, she realized how much she had let go. And in that letting go, she had found something far more valuable: peace. The mother reflected on how far she had come. The woman she had been at the beginning of this journey seemed almost like a stranger now, so consumed by pride and fear, so resistant to change. But through the pain of confrontation, the shock of discovery, and the slow work of forgiveness, she had transformed. Her relationship with her son, once strained almost to the breaking point, had begun to heal. And though there was still work to be done, the mother could now see that the love her son had found was not a threat, but a gift. A gift that had opened her eyes to what truly mattered. As the mother prepared for the wedding, she allowed herself a moment to reflect on the woman her son had chosen. The fiancée, soon to be her daughter-in-law, had shown a grace and resilience that the mother had once been blind to. This was not a woman seeking to climb the social ladder or take advantage of the family's wealth. Instead, she was someone who had faced her own hardships with quiet strength, building a new life from the ashes of her past. The mother now saw that this strength was exactly what her son needed in a partner, someone who could stand by him through life's inevitable challenges. For the first time, the mother felt a sense of pride in her son's choice. It wasn't the pride that came from status or appearances, but the quiet pride of knowing that her son had chosen well, not just for the family, but for himself. The mother had spent so long trying to control his future that she hadn't realized he was already capable of shaping it on his own. Now, as she prepared to watch him marry, she could finally let go of the need to control. This was his life, his love, and his future. And she was ready to accept it, with all the grace she could muster. The wedding was a simple affair, attended by close friends and family. As the mother watched her son stand at the altar, waiting for his bride, she felt a swell of emotion rise in her chest. This was the moment she had feared for so long, yet now that it had arrived, she felt nothing but joy. Her son's face lit up as the fiancé walked down the aisle, and in that moment, the mother saw them both as they truly were, two people who had fought for their love, who had endured the storms of judgment and resistance, and who had come out stronger on the other side. When the ceremony concluded and the guests moved into the reception, the mother found herself standing beside her new daughter-in-law. There was a quiet moment between them, one that carried the weight of everything that had passed between them. The fiancé looked at the mother, a soft smile on her face, and for the first time, the mother smiled back, genuinely, without hesitation. It was a smile that spoke of forgiveness, acceptance, and the beginnings of something new. "Welcome to the family," the mother said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. And with those words, the final wall between them fell. The transformation in the mother was profound, but it wasn't just about accepting her son's marriage. It was about learning to let go of the need to control, to protect, to shape the world according to her own expectations. She had spent so long trying to preserve the family's legacy that she had forgotten what legacy truly meant. It wasn't about wealth or status or maintaining appearances. It was about love, love that endured through hardship, love that grew even when faced with resistance, and love that had the power to heal. This, she now realized, was the legacy she wanted to leave behind. As the evening wore on, the mother watched her son and his new wife dance together under the soft glow of the lights. They moved with a kind of ease that only comes from deep understanding, a quiet joy that spoke of the battles they had fought to be together. The mother had once feared that this marriage would destroy everything she had worked for, but now she saw that it was exactly what the family needed. This love, this partnership, was the future of their legacy. It was not about maintaining the past, but about embracing the new, the unexpected, and the transformative power of love. The mother's journey had been one of difficult truths and hard-earned realizations. She had been forced to confront her own flaws, her own prejudices, and the limits of her control. But in doing so, she had discovered something far more valuable, a deeper connection to her son, a newfound respect for his wife, and a renewed understanding of what it meant to be part of a family. Family, she now knew, wasn't about keeping people out or maintaining rigid standards. It was about welcoming people in, embracing their differences, and growing stronger together. And in that, she found peace. As the night came to a close, the mother felt lighter than she had in years. The transformation she had undergone was not one of grand gestures, but of small, meaningful changes in the way she saw the world. Her son and his new wife had given her a gift she hadn't expected, the chance to grow, to evolve, and to let go of the things that no longer mattered. She smiled as she watched them, knowing that their love had not only changed them, but had transformed her as well. And with that thought, the mother realized that she had found something she hadn't known she was missing: freedom. If this story moved you, you're going to love what's next. The next story is even more captivating, full of unexpected twists and deep emotional moments. Click on the video appearing on your screen and dive into a new world of unforgettable characters and life-changing experiences. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you'll never miss any of the best, heartwarming stories we share. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this story. We love hearing from you.